This is the first of a two-part series on the Sabbath. In this video, we will look at what the Bible teaches on the subject and respond to a few common objections. The second in the series will be a direct response to the Watchtower. There is no better place to start than at the beginning, but just before I touch on the Sabbath, I want to touch on something of much greater importance, that is, your regard for God. Would you agree with these words from this Song of Moses? Dumb question, actually. I'm sure you do.
Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like thee, glorious in holiness, fearful in praises, doing wonders?
Do we all agree with the following?
For great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He also is to be feared above all gods. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and a terrible, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward.
Is there anyone out there watching this video who is able to come up with words that adequately capture the true essence of how great, how awesome, how marvelous our God is? Do you respect Him? Do you revere Him? Do you respect Him above every man, every institution, above every religion, above everything? Do you respect Him above yourself? Do you respect His word, His will, above your opinion? If you do, how do you regard the things for which He has a high regard? I'm going to share something with you, and I'm going to assure you that it is true. You can't take my word for this one. It was not me who, in a perfect world, a world in which there was no sin, blessed the Sabbath and set it aside for holy use.
Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day, and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made.
No sin in the world. No Jew existed. It was in a perfect world that your God, our great God, the one we adore, the one we revere and worship, the one to whom we pray, the one for whom we have the greatest of respect, sanctified the seventh day. Forget about the fourth commandment for a minute. Let us consider what happened here. If your God sanctified something, anything at all, if your God blessed a pencil and sanctified it, what do you believe your attitude should be toward that pencil? What should be our general attitude to things that are holy?
And he said, Draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground.
The story of Uzzah has an extremely important lesson for us.
And when they came to Nachon's threshing floor, Uzzah put forth his hand to the ark of God, and took hold of it, for the oxen shook it. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Uzzah, and God smote him there for his error, and there he died by the ark of God.
Wasn't that a little harsh? The man was only trying to assist because he felt the ark would fall. What did he do wrong?
But they shall not touch any holy thing, lest they die.
That gives us an insight into how God views holy things. Belshazzar obviously did not worship God, but God did not kill him for that. He lived with his rejection of God to be an adult. But what was the last straw? What was it that kindled God's anger so much against this heathen monarch?
Belshazzar, whiles he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine, and praised the gods of gold, and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand, and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote.
You know how that story ended. The handwriting on the wall was interpreted to mean Belshazzar was weighed in the balance and found wanting. That night Babylon was defeated, and
in that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain.
If God placed such a high regard on things made by imperfect men in a fallen, imperfect world, but sanctified by himself, how much more something that was made by him and sanctified by him in a sinless world? How did God regard the Sabbath?
If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and shalt honour him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. Then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord hath spoken it.
You might say, come on now, Winston. God was speaking to literal Israel. That promise was made to them. It doesn't apply to us. The point I want you to zoom in on is not the promise God made, nor what he said to Israel, but what he said of the Sabbath in relation to himself. He said, my holy day, a delight, the holy of the Lord. This is your God speaking here, not some fanatical, overzealous Sabbath keeper. The Sabbath was sanctified by God before there was ever a Jew. It is not a Jewish Sabbath. It is God's holy day. Moses did not bless and sanctify it. God did.
The seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it.
God did not tell Israel, I have given you the Sabbath as your holy day. No, he told them, the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. Not their day, his day. So the notion that God gave the Sabbath to the Israelites is crazy if it is meant that it was their day. God has never handed over ownership of his day to any nation.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily, my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Ye shall fear every man his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Ye shall keep my Sabbaths, and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Lord. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant.
But didn't the Lord say he gave the Sabbath to the Israelites?
Yes, he did.
Moreover, also I gave them my Sabbaths, to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctify them.
But what does it mean? Let's read the very next verse to put that into context.
But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They walked not in my statutes, and they despised my judgments, which if a man do, he shall even live in them. And my Sabbaths they greatly polluted. Then I said, I would pour out my fury upon them in the wilderness to consume them.
Another indication of how seriously God regards the holy things. By giving them his Sabbath, God was not talking here about handing over ownership, but giving them instruction to observe it so that they would be identified with him, that they were his people. God continued to refer to the Sabbath as his day, not theirs.
Thou hast despised mine holy things, and hast profaned my Sabbaths. Her priests have violated my law, and have profaned mine holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and profane, neither have they shown difference between the unclean and the clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Moreover, this they have done unto me. They have defiled my sanctuary in the same day, and have profaned my Sabbaths. And in controversy they shall stand in judgment, and they shall judge it according to my judgments. And they shall keep my laws and my statutes in all mine assemblies, and they shall hallow my Sabbaths.
I could have just mentioned those passages of Scripture, but I had them read for a reason. There are many more passages like these. Some say that Sabbath keepers are fussy about the Sabbath. Have you observed how fussy God is about his day?
But I am sure I have read God saying, your Sabbaths, speaking to Israel. Isn't that proof that the Sabbath is a Jewish institution?
That is a very good question. The answer is no. But before I answer that question, please allow me to keep a promise I made in the previous video to demonstrate that the Sabbath was in effect before the covenant at Mount Sinai. You cannot imagine that God would have blessed the Sabbath in the Garden of Eden and not tell Adam and Eve about it. Now that you have seen his repeated high regard for his day, how can one even think that he did not tell any of his faithful servants about it? The book of Genesis was a quick record of thousands of years of activities from the creation of the world to when it was destroyed by the flood, to the call of Abraham and the election of the nation of Israel as God's chosen people. Lots and lots of details have been left out. The book of Exodus then tells us how the nation was in Egyptian captivity for some 400 years. Generations died there. Egypt was a pagan nation. The children of Israel were not allowed to practice their religion to the fullest. Now we come to their delivery from Egypt. In Exodus 16, before Sinai, we see God raining manna from heaven to feed them. They were instructed to gather twice as much on the sixth day, because none would fall on the Sabbath. If the Sabbath were a new thing to them, they would have asked Moses what is a Sabbath when he told them about it in verse 23. There is no hint in the Bible that they did not know what the Sabbath was. Manna was new to them. They did not know what that was, but not one person questioned what the Sabbath was. I want to now draw your attention to what God said when some people disobeyed and went looking for manna on the Sabbath.
How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws?
How long? First we are told that Abraham kept God's commandments and his laws. It is now abundantly clear that the Sabbath was part of those commandments and laws. How long? This was not a new concept to them. No wonder the commandment said, "Remember the Sabbath day." How ironic that this is the commandment that people are telling you to forget, telling me to forget about it. Now to the question of God speaking to your Sabbaths. He was referring to other Sabbaths, ceremonial Sabbaths that he gave them. You will find this in the 23rd division of the book of Leviticus.
Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, In the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, and holy convocation.
There's more. A ceremonial day in which no work is to be done is considered a Sabbath, as the Day of Atonement was.
Also on the 10th day of this 7th month there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be an holy convocation unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord. And ye shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement, to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God.
Please note that these would not necessarily fall on the 7th day of the week.
It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls. In the 9th day of the month at even, from even unto even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath.
There you have it. God called it your Sabbath. But I am happy that God did not leave it to chance that some would confuse it with his Sabbath. He made a clear distinction.
Beside the Sabbaths of the Lord, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your free will offerings which ye give unto the Lord, also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the 1st day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath.
The New International Version renders verse 38 this way: These offerings are in addition to those of the Lord's Sabbaths. One of my favorite translations of this verse is found in the New International Reader's Version. The feasts are in addition to my Sabbath days. These are the Sabbath days to which Paul made reference in Colossians 2:14-17.
Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to his cross. And having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. Let no man therefore judge you in meat, or in drink, or in respect of an holy day, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ.
Clearly, the Sabbath that was blessed by our great, awesome, marvelous God before sin ever entered the world was not a shadow of things to come. The first promise of Christ coming to redeem man was made in Genesis 3 verse 15, immediately after the fall. This was after Adam and Eve sinned. The Sabbath of the Lord our God was blessed and sanctified before sin entered the picture. Do you think that God, with his regard for things he has sanctified, would have nailed his holy day to the cross?
But didn't he nail his holy son to the cross?
Perish that thought. Roman soldiers nailed Jesus to the cross, or torture stake if you prefer. I will address that torture stake subject in a later video. But the laws pointing to Christ and his sacrifice were symbolically nailed to the cross by God. Back to the point. The Jewish Sabbaths were nailed to the cross, not the Sabbath of the Lord our God. There is more evidence of that. Had they been, Paul, an apostle of Christ, would not have made it his manner to go to church on Sabbaths as Jesus did, walking as Jesus walked.
And he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and stood up for to read.
Some persons argue that Jesus only went to church on Sabbath because he was a Jew. First of all, we all know that Jesus had no qualms about defying traditions. Secondly, have we forgotten that Jesus is God? We have already discussed God's regard for the Sabbath. Surely, you could not imagine that Jesus could have possibly had a lower regard for his holy day.
For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day.
So, it was Jesus' manner to go to church on Sabbaths. Along with the early apostles, Paul, who told us in Colossians to let no man judge you in Sabbath days, was clearly referring to the ceremonial Sabbath, which were a shadow of Christ, because he also had the custom of going to church on Sabbaths. This after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. I love the similarity of the wording of these two verses. Luke 4:16 told us that Jesus went into the synagogue as his custom was. Acts 17:2 tells us that Paul did it as his manner was.
And Paul, as his manner was, went in unto them, and 3 Sabbath days reasoned with them out of the Scriptures.
And we see other verses that confirm it was in fact his custom.
But when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia, and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day, and sat down.
By the way, this was in Antioch, where they were first called Christians. The early Christian church worshipped on Sabbaths. This was not a one-off situation. It was a weekly thing. Also, it was not just a Jewish thing. The Gentiles also did.
And when the Jews were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath.
Some people claim that the early Christian church worshipped on the first day of the week, commemorating the resurrection of Jesus. Why then did not the Gentiles ask Paul to preach to them the next day? No, they asked that it happen the next Sabbath. And what happened?
And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of God.
Still, people, determined not to show respect to the day that their God sanctified, argue that Paul only did this because it was convenient to find large receptive crowds on Sabbaths. But that argument will crumble too.
And on the Sabbath we went out of the city by a riverside, where prayer was wont to be made. And we sat down, and spake unto the women which resorted thither.
There you have it. What is the importance of indicating this was the Sabbath? Here we find Paul in a situation where there was no synagogue nearby, seeking a quiet place by a river for prayer, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. If he wanted a crowd, he would have stayed in the city, but he chose a quiet place on the Sabbath. That was Philippi. He then moved on to Corinth, and what did he do every Sabbath?
And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks.
Persuaded who? Jews and Greeks. It was not only the Jews who worshipped on Sabbaths during Paul's time, friends. This was not a Jewish thing. In the previous video, looking on the book of Galatians, did you observe the venom that Paul spewed for those who were encouraging the Gentiles to be circumcised and keep the law of Moses? He made a very strong statement.
As for those agitators, I wish they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves.
That is how strongly Paul felt about those teaching the Gentiles to observe the law of Moses, laws abolished with Jesus' death. He wrote the book of Galatians to address this matter, but he himself worshipped every Sabbath with Jews and with Gentiles. To settle this controversy, there is also biblical evidence that Paul stressed the importance of still observing the Sabbath, if you accept the common belief that he is the author of the book of Hebrews. The Watchtower's own Bible confirms that fact. In Hebrews 4, some argue that Paul is speaking to the future rest that will come for all the redeemed when this sinful world is over. But again, that argument will also crumble under the weight of the evidence in the Bible. The language is not crystal clear. It almost appears he is using prophetic language, but just a little thinking and a little application make it clear.
Let us therefore fear, lest a promise being left us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it.
This is where it sounds like Paul is speaking of a future rest that is promised, but a different picture is seen as we continue.
For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it.
Do you remember the numerous complaints from God himself that Israel did not hallow his Sabbaths? The next verse confirms that this is what Paul is talking about, not some future permanent rest.
For we which have believed do enter into rest, as he said, As I have sworn in my wrath, if they shall enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world.
Two clues are given there. 1. Paul said that those who believed do enter, present tense, not future. 2. He spoke about the creation of the world, which is what the Sabbath was to be observed in memorial of.
For he spake in a certain place of the seventh day, on this wise, And God did rest the seventh day from all his works. And in this place again, If they shall enter into my rest.
There you have it. This is a clear discussion of the seventh-day Sabbath, and not some symbolic future rest. Do you remember God repeatedly calling the Sabbath my day? Now we see my rest.
Seeing therefore it remaineth that some must enter therein, and they to whom it was first preached entered not in because of unbelief.
To paraphrase, see therefore, the Sabbath command still remains and is still applicable to us. The Israelites who first got the message did not obey because of disbelief. Again, go back to the many complaints from God that they did not observe his Sabbaths.
Again, he limiteth a certain day, saying in David, Today, after so long a time, as it is said, Today, if ye will hear his voice, harden not your hearts.
This is the punchline. I was a bit curious about what Paul meant here, because I was not aware of God having any specific discourse with David about the Sabbath, so I turned to the Watchtower Bible, which does a lot of cross-referencing. For Hebrews 4 verse 7, the Watchtower Bible pointed me to Psalm 95, 7 and 8. When I got there, I saw the part about, If you will hear his voice, harden not your heart. I therefore decided to read the entire passage, where I saw another sentence quoted in Hebrews 4. That was Psalm 95 verse 11, Unto whom I swear in my wrath, that they should not enter into my rest. And what did I see when I checked the reference in the Watchtower Bible? It pointed to Genesis 2 verse 3, where Jesus blessed the Sabbath. Clearly, the Watchtower knows that the rest being discussed in Hebrews 4 is the Sabbath. Verses 9 to 11 clearly tell us that the Sabbath is not abolished, but remains for Christians, and we are admonished not to follow the same pattern of disobedience as did Israel.
There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his. Let us labour therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief.
Let us labour therefore to enter into that rest.
The New International Version uses the word disobedience in place of unbelief. Guess which other translation also uses the same word.
Let us therefore do our utmost to enter into that rest, so that no one may fall into the same pattern of disobedience.
Those who claim that the fourth commandment is abolished should really know better. If the Sabbath was to be abolished at the death of Jesus, surely wouldn't those closest to him have known? What did they do immediately after Jesus' death?
And they returned, and prepared spices and ointments, and rested the Sabbath day, according to the commandment.
According to the commandment. Which commandment? That is as clear as crystal. So, here we saw that God blessed and sanctified the Sabbath in a perfect, sinless world, before there ever was a Jew. We saw that the Sabbath is God's holy day, not a Jewish institution. We have reviewed the high regard that God himself placed on his day. We saw that Jesus is Lord of the Sabbath. We have seen that the apostles and the early Christian church, Jews and Gentiles alike, worshipped on Sabbath. The Bible says every Sabbath. And we have seen that those closest to Jesus still obeyed the fourth commandment as specifically stated in the scriptures after Jesus' death. Had Jesus intended to abolish the Sabbath, would he not have told them so? Rather than telling them to stop observing the Sabbath after his death, He warned them not to flee Jerusalem during the time of trouble on the Sabbath.
But pray ye, that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day.
Moses told us in Genesis 2 that God blessed the Sabbath day and sanctified it. But if that is not good enough for you, God himself wrote it down with his own finger in a stone to tell you.
Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it.
Wherefore have you seen any verse in the Bible that even hints that the sanctity and blessing placed on the seventh day was ever removed? In fact, the Bible tells us something about when God blesses something.
For you, Lord, have blessed it, and it will be blessed forever.
No wonder, speaking of the New Jerusalem, God himself tells us via the prophet Isaiah,
For as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord.
My brothers and sisters, even if the forefathers were not aware of God blessing the seventh day before there was a Jew, you know. Even if they did not know of the fourth commandment, you do. Even if there was no fourth commandment, we have the first and greatest commandment, which, by the way, the critics say has replaced the 10 commandments. If you love God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength, how can you not have respect for that which he has respect? How can you not reverence what he made holy? How can you disregard his holy day? Operative word, holy. Practically every Sabbath, I wonder if Christians who do not observe the Sabbath realize what they are missing. I am also flabbergasted that some see the Sabbath as a burden. A burden? When did rest become a burden? I am resting, worshipping, and having marvelous fellowship with my brethren, free from the cares of life, while they are working or engaged in some secular activity or stressing about the cares of life. Sometimes in the middle of the week, we can't wait for Sabbath to come, but some believe we are under a yoke. I have never seen a greater paradox. It's the irony of ironies. God is no idiot. He knew exactly what he meant about calling the Sabbath a delight. Folks, the commandments of God are anything but a yoke or grievous.
For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous.
I wish you could come to know the joy of Sabbath observance, O God's holy day, the day in which I have my best meals, the best fellowship around wonderful people, delving into the best words ever written, enjoying rich spiritual music.
But even in the storm, I can feel the calm, and here's the reason why. I know the peace speaker. I know him by name. I know the peace speaker. He controls.
And best of all, effortlessly dismissing the cares of this life. It's the day when you forget that you have bills unpaid or an exam to be studied for, a report that must be handed in to the boss, chores that must be completed. I know from personal experience what Jesus meant when he said the Sabbath was made for man. In this life, I do not know how I could have survived without it. I don't know how you do. I am so happy that God blessed the Sabbath day and set it aside for rest and worship. In the next video, I will respond directly to the Watchtower on this subject.